And it's a pleasure that I'm here today with our three speakers. The first one is Robert Missig, who is an Austrian journalist, writer and blogger. He's apparently regarded as one of the most pugnacious left-wing journalists of his generation. We're also joined by Jessica Ekdish, who is the legislative director with the Blue-Green Alliance, where she directs BGA's legislative policy and partnership efforts in Washington, DC. Her portfolio includes climate, energy, and infrastructure issues. And I'm also here today with Alexander Reitzenstein, who is Senior Policy Advisor with the climate think tank E3G. His role focuses on shaping a just transition to the net zero economy and the green recovery in Europe. Also a visiting fellow at Das Progressive Zentrum, he works in the program Social and Economic Transformation on climate change, just transition, and the transformation of the energy system. I'm also going to be joined later by a co-chair who is my colleague, to ensure gender equality, truly is David Rinaldi, who is FEP's economist and Director of Studies and Policy. He's just joined us here. Hi, David.
Hi, everybody.
So, this is the, and this is, of course, a very good title in the digital area where we're restarting our computers. And so it comes back better. And this is, of course, also what we want to do now. We want to restore our societies and build back better. And because of COVID, we're further ahead now in the climate debate than we anticipated. So for transforming our societies, this is a real game changer. But we need to make sure it stays that way. We need to make sure that we stay ahead. So I'm pleased that this discussion is really also about how to move forward. And there really is appetite for change, but there is also the need to plan and reorientate our societies. Our generation is having to address the climate crisis in an era of rising inequalities, also combating the consequences now of the health pandemic, economic recession, whilst at the same time building adaptation measures. So it's really important that the right political and policy frameworks are put in place now, and this period offers us the window of opportunity that the scientists warned us about. So it's looking at how we redesign our societies. So it's great to come together. We're here in Europe and we're joined by friends from North America. My name's Charlotte Billingham. I'm Senior Policy Advisor at FEPS working on the climate portfolio. FEPS is the Foundation for European Progressive Studies. We are the only progressive think tank at European level, closely linked to the social democratic political family. We were established 12 years ago in order to try and bridge the gap between the political institutions and civil society. We've been working on the topic of just transition, climate justice, and more recently, how to boost the scale and ambition of the European Green Deal, and to make sure it's a Green Deal for all, one that achieves sustainability and equality at the same time. FEPS has a network of over 50 member think tanks. Das Progressive Zentrum is one of them. And this particular breakout session is a joint initiative of FEPS and the Friedrich-Ebert Stiftung. And importantly, we're also really pleased this summit has an extra added value of bringing together progressives from across the spectrum, and in that sense also building bridges. Now today, this interactive session will explore how we can foster change whilst at the same time strengthening social cohesion. The questions we're going to be looking at really is how do communities embrace change without losing the proud identity, traditions and values that they're built on. And for example, our work has identified the importance of national programs as well as European ones, but that they need to be adapted to regional and local circumstances. In the framework of just transition, for example, access to good transport links, as well as education and training to have the right skills are just as important as investing in sustainable infrastructure. But most of all, they need to ensure incredibly effective policy design. It's so important to really steer the transition because we know otherwise the polluting companies with the most responsibility will not change their activities. But this needs to be done in an inclusive way with the whole community to ensure everybody feels ownership of the transformation. And our Irish think tank Task, also working on this topic with us, talks a lot about the social approval needed, which I think we're going to be discussing today as well. So it's really looking at how to build a robust, holistic, and inclusive policy framework. We're first going to be joined by Robert Missig, who's going to be giving us some scene-setting remarks on structural change, the role of identity, communities, and people. So without further ado, I give the floor to Robert, please.
Yes, thank you, Charlotte. It's really an honor here to have the possibility to speak here. And you also mentioned that we bring together thinkers and people working on think tanks on a broad sphere, and I think it's totally clear, because I'm not a specialist on on technological change, and especially not a specialist on the climate issues. But if I'm a specialist on anything, I'm worked a lot about changes in political representation and frustrations of the working classes. And we can understand, let's start with this remark, that we have a lot of historical crisis in the moment. Yes, we have the first historical crisis, the climate crisis, and what we have to do to save our planet, or also our communities and our nation states to make them survivable. Second, we have also since years a political crisis. I have only to mention the rise of right-wing populist or authoritarian politicians all around the world. And third, we have now the problem of this historic economic global crisis we will face after the corona crisis as a health crisis. So we can also understand that all these three things interact and have something to do, and will also in the future have something to do, something together, and will interact together. Let me start with one short remark. The first short remark is we have all in all our societies, I don't think I say anything new for anybody, we have this debate about the working class or the working classes, or sometimes it's also framed as the white working classes, that they are first frustrated and alienated by the political process, and their traditional representatives, or the representatives that should be the traditional social representatives, that's usually the progressive parties and social democratic or socialist parties, or the center-left parties. The second point is that they feel as victims of the structural change, the economic, structural, technological change, and the economic transformations of the last, let's say, 30 years, 40 years, beginning with the 80s at least. The economic transformations that we mention when we talk about processes of deindustrializations and so on. And the third element of that is that some or a lot of parts of these traditional working classes feel that they are not respected anymore, that their values don't count anymore, and that they don't have a voice and are not heard in the political process. Second, we should be absolutely clear that we talk about different political cultures, about countries in different continents that have a lot of differences. For sure, there are differences between Vienna, Ohio, Eastern London, Berlin, Gelsenkirchen, Marseille, and let's say Saxon, Leipzig, or also Budapest. Yeah, there are huge cultural, political, traditional differences, but this issue is nearly in every society the same. It's also talked about in the same words. The word we as normal people, we as regular guys, we as the working class, we as the working people, we are not heard anymore. And then there are some right-wing populists or right-wing extremists. They are coming and saying, oh, I am your voice. So given all traditional political differences that are really deep differences, also the political culture in the US is so different from the political cultures to Germany. It's totally astonishing that this modus is everywhere the same, nearly everything, everywhere the same. Third, what we are talking about if we talk about the working class. There are a lot of phrases that are used. The phrases of the working class or dead working classes, which means obviously that there are popular classes that are not too homogeneous, that they are really diverse and have a heterogenic character. And I would add to this, the working classes always had a very diverse and heterogenic character. This is something like a left-wing fantasy that there is a working class. There never was a working class. It was all the time working classes. They are very diverse, ethnological, from the ethnological background, diverse also from their skills, from what they are pride on, where they are coming from. Are they more artisans? Were they before landowners? Were they land workers, land laborers? Are they workers in the big cities, or are they workers in the small cities? There was all the time, also 200 years and 150 years ago, huge differences between the working classes. There are also other phrases which are used: the lower classes, or the lower classes and the lower middle classes. You all know these phrases, and so also the phrases they are people from these working classes use for themselves too. You know it in German, we say die einfachen Leute. Ich gehöre zu den einfachen Leuten in the English language. Some would say we are the regular guys, and so on. These are also phrases for what we are talking about when we are talking about the working class. I would be able to talk a lot about, but then I wouldn't be able to do it in 7 minutes, to talk a lot about in spite of the heterogeneity and the diversity of the working classes, there are some social norms and social values that are shared generally by most parts of the working classes, which we can also, for that reason, call the social norms and values of the working classes. I only touch it. The pride for their own skills, the pride to be able to feed your family, the pride to do it with hard work, that you feel you do a work that has sense because it's a hard physical work, or it's a hard routinized work. So you do something more senseful than this intellectual or these better people, or the people that feel better. So these and some more elements are elements of the values and the social norms of the working classes, and they want to feel respected, and they don't want to be used as used and regarded instrumentally. And at some time in history, people from the different spheres of the working classes felt respected, felt to be in the center of the consciousness of their nations. And in the last 30 years, they lost this. They lost the feeling that they are in the center of the political consciousness of their country. They feel that they are not respected anymore, that the political change, or the economic change has some winners, but not they are winners. They are more or less the victims of the social change. I'm here in Nuremberg, where we can tell a lot about this on some. I would be able to tell a lot about it from very specific economic transformations, factories, globally important factories that closed. People lost their jobs, and also if they found new jobs, they weren't these good jobs and these respected jobs, than they had before. So we had to have the feeling in the last 30 years that they lost ground economically, and that the political parties and the political sphere and the people from the political process don't even care about them. So if you look in empirical studies, in social studies, in Germany, but also in the US, you always feel this, hear this word, ich kümmere mich nur mehr mich selbst. I only take care about myself. This is something of a, how can we call it, depressive individualization. Yeah. So you feel that there is no ground for solidarity anymore. You can where you can count to, and you feel it depends only on yourself. There is no feeling of solidarity, and we can this feeling of being neglected is not only in the workspace, it's also in the working class livelihoods, that people have the feeling their quarters and their parts of the city, they often go down and are underprivileged places. So I make a point here because then otherwise it would be too long. If we think now about the moment we are now in with the corona crisis, with the necessity to accelerate economic change, to accelerate, for example, going away from the old school car industry to maybe a new school car industry, or no car industry anyhow, possible. Then we can imagine what this would mean on social stress again to this social group. So what has to be done? What has to be done? That's not my point is the analysis of the problem, and it would be to answer what has to be done. But I say some elements. I think the first one important thing to solve this problem is to talk about this problem, because part of the problem is that these social layers feel their problem is not even addressed. So the first thing is to talk about and to talk with these people, so that they feel respected, and so that they have the feeling again that they have voices in the political process and in the public sphere. And the second is, for example, for sure to invest primarily in working class or working classes livelihoods and neighborhoods, and for sure to secure good jobs for everybody. But this is the main but difficult task we have to solve in the next 15, 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. And yeah, indeed, you've really set the scene there in, like you say, talking about how it is a matter of representation, how it's the access to participation, but also there is an appetite for change, but people perhaps lack the tools, let's say, to be able to take part in that change. So like, I think that this is a great transition then for Jessica Ektisch to come in and talk about what we can be doing, please, and to react to what Robert's just told us, please.
Great, thanks so much, Charlotte, and I'm really happy to be here with all of you. Robert, appreciate your remarks. I think you'll hear a lot of similar themes in what I have to say this morning, this afternoon for many of you. So I'm happy to share a little bit of our perspective here in the US. I think what COVID-19 and really this moment that we're in has underscored for, I think, many of us here in the US, something that we already knew, which is that our country in large part isn't working. The pandemic has certainly taken its toll here, and it's really nowhere close to done. We've surpassed 2 million cases, 100,000 deaths. Unemployment has reached over 40 million here. Our state and local government budgets are completely ravaged. And we're months into this pandemic, and our workers continue to struggle to stay safe and healthy on the job, particularly as we start to see states here in the US reopening parts of the economy. But at the same time, the pandemic has really cast a clear spotlight on all of the parts of our society that already weren't working for people. We went into this pandemic with what we would say three ongoing and closely related crises: economic inequality, racial inequality, and climate change. Our country has been struggling for decades, if not forever, with deep and crippling inequality. Workers here have seen their pay shrink. Our union density has dramatically decreased. We've lost power. Workers have lost power over time. The deck has been stacked even further against people of color, which we're seeing in the context of COVID-19. For example, Black Americans make up just 12% of the US population, but represent over 22% of COVID-19 deaths. At the same time, we know we're facing a climate crisis. It's a dire, urgent, existential threat, and the longer we delay, the stronger the action will be required. It also compounds inequities, with lower income workers and communities of color hit the hardest. So here at the Blue-Green Alliance, we're a partnership of American labor unions and environmental organizations. So we see these issues as fundamentally linked. That's why this past summer we released Solidarity for Climate Action, which is a platform that aims to address these crises simultaneously. And I would say, I think a theme we hear is that returning to normal is not good enough. We have to strive as a society to do better. And as we think about economic recovery, we strongly believe that it has to accomplish multiple things at the same time. Investing to protect and create good union jobs, has to deliver public health and climate benefits, and it has to create a cleaner, stronger, and more equitable society for all of us. So we've laid out what we think is a roadmap to do that. So I'm going to list 5 things we think we need to do. First, we have to recognize that our country, the world, we're still obviously reeling from the impacts of the pandemic. So we need to make sure we continue to focus on protecting vulnerable communities, safeguarding jobs, homes, livelihoods, and shoring up essential public services. Second, we have to prioritize investments in the workers and communities that need it most, especially low-income communities, communities of color, deindustrialized communities, that would include regions like Appalachia here in the US that were already hit economically going into the crisis. And we have to put working people front and center in the solutions that we put forward. Third, we are very focused on investing at scale in infrastructure and clean energy, which we know can be a significant driver of job creation and economic growth. But we have to do it right. We can't just spend a bunch of money and hope it results in the kinds of jobs and the kinds of outcomes that we want to see. We have to invest at the scale that this crisis and recovery demands, but we can't afford to spend the level required in ways that double down on the crises we're facing and potentially further exacerbate inequality. So we are very focused on ensuring that we make investments in ways that support and create, again, good union jobs and deliver clear environmental, health, and climate benefits. Fourth, we have to focus on rebuilding our manufacturing sector. Here in the US, our manufacturing sector has been decimated. It's taken a major hit during this pandemic, and this pandemic has really revealed the sad state of our domestic supply chain. The industrial sector is also a significant growing source of emissions, both globally and within the US. So we're calling for a major investment in transforming heavy industry and retooling to build more of the products, materials, technologies of the future that can reduce emissions while providing pathways into good jobs. And then lastly, we believe we need to rebuild the capacity of our public sector and services and provide critical long-term support for protections, support and protections for workers. Here, the pandemic has dramatically exposed the inadequate investments we've made in our public sector and our public sector workers. So we need to rebuild and invest in our healthcare systems, our public health agencies, education, community-based services to not only prepare for and be more resilient to pandemics like COVID-19, but also to climate disasters that we're going to continue to see. And we also have a focus on rebuilding and expanding our social safety net, including pensions, healthcare, retirement security, and ensuring worker health and safety. So I think in closing, I'll say, we really think there is a pathway for us to build a fairer, more sustainable, more equitable future, and making smart investments where they're needed, ensuring that justice is really a core principle of everything that we do, and rebuilding with the reality of climate change at the forefront. We think those are the ways that we can get there. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
I step in as a second moderator just to give the floor to Alexander. I think you have heard, Alexander, a lot about how our society has crucial challenges ahead, and how our society is a little bit distant in terms of voices and different classes that don't feel represented or heard. So how to unite people, if you want, the working class, the youth, the entrepreneurs, the workers, and the policymakers for an effective transition?
Yeah, thanks, David. Thanks, Charlotte. That's a challenging question to begin with. I'm really excited to be here. Also, thanks, Robert and Jessica, for the really insightful statements at the beginning. And I think I will try to touch upon a couple of the things you have mentioned. I want to talk about three things mainly. First is this issue around representation. So who should be represented and how? The second is about this question of time. How much time do we have, and what does planning security in a transition actually mean? And the third is around the design of a just transition. And I guess my angle is more from a European just transition policy perspective here. So in terms of who should be engaged, two of the challenges have already been mentioned during the conference, I think. Maya Göppel in her keynote yesterday talked about kind of how do we get from a story of winners and losers to a story of kind of co-creators and co-stewards of change. And I think the other one, which is quite apparent in many of the conversations, is that when we talk about this climate transition, it's very often not really about the technological case, because a lot of the technology is in place and the economy is also moving towards this. But it's kind of around the social and political challenges. And I think in this context in Europe, the European Green Deal is at least the attempt for now, the vision, and hopefully soon to be the implementation of this kind of bridging of the climate side and the broader politics of the society and the economy. And I think what it really highlights is that we need a broad understanding of this justice in the transition. So I think we need to have a strong focus on local communities and also on alliances. In terms of alliances, I think the Blue-Green Alliance is one of the best examples worldwide of what this can look like, cooperation between environmental NGOs and unions. In terms of communities, I think one point I'm realizing in many of the conversations is that often the focus is kind of on the large scale industries. So we have a conversation about a large coal plant or about the large car manufacturer, less so, for example, on the local and global supply chains, and less unionized parts of the workforce. And I think this is one group which should be more represented. I guess this is a challenge for union, but I think that's also a challenge for the broader movement, how to bring in these people which are less organized. But I think, which is also quite important, is to have a voice for broader civil society, people locally affected by environmental degradation, but also the global climate justice movement, to not lose sight of where we want to need to head to in terms of the vision between this kind of bridging this local context and kind of the global challenge of climate change. That's on the first point. On the second, in terms of planning security, I feel like there's always this bit of, it appears to be a dilemma between the urgency of climate action we need and the time we need for structural changes, for especially also cultural change, and for example, perceptions of regional identities. For example, here in Germany, the Ruhr region, which is the hard coal and steel region basically of the country. It was basically a process of 60, 70 years basically to move to a new narrative, and it's still not fully there yet, I would say. It's also an interesting example how history plays into this, but it's certainly still seen as, in a way, a conflict line. And the second one we see is that it's quite complex. So no one really knows what the best structural change and transition process looks like. So some things will work out, others probably won't. And I think this is kind of, for politics, quite a challenge, because it means we have to be quite realistic and honest in terms of what public policy can actually deliver. So for example, if we have a narrative of we have to replace each and every job with the same job at the same place in the beginning, there's at least a high risk of a lot of disappointment if we don't manage to do this. And I think in terms of the communications, that's definitely something which requires a bit more of discussion. And it might sound a bit counterintuitive here, but I would argue that for security, for communities and for regions in the longer term, we definitely need the long-term vision, and we need to know where to head to. But in the short term, we need flexibility in the political process, because it's such a dynamic environment. One example is coal phase outs. Now with COVID, we can see this acceleration of change basically. So a lot of coal plants are, for example, driven out of the markets, and we might see that this market-driven change is actually faster than political processes. And some countries have now moved forward the coal phase outs, for example. And I think when thinking about legislation, we have to be really smart in bringing in these elements of flexibility, both in terms of the climate ambition, but also in terms of how we invest and what we focus on. And lastly, the third point on design. So it's maybe a boring answer. I certainly don't think there is a blueprint for just transition. There is no one size fits all solution for transitions all across the world. But what I think we can say is that change in region, also in industrial regions, is not new. I guess what is quite new is that climate policy is accelerating this, and this is kind of what we need to tackle at the moment. But we do have a lot of evidence, historic evidence from regions, how this can be done and what was effective. So I think there is still a good argument for learning and for cooperation between regions, between communities. And something like the EU Coal Regions and Transition Platform is an example of what this can look like. But what it also means is that locally we need room for experiments. So we cannot assume that everything will work out. So this means investments, but this also needs a quite broad portfolio of what we focus on. And this also includes cultural aspects, this includes infrastructure, this includes social policy. And it might be that in some region, the one big Tesla gigafactory is the solution, but in many regions, it will probably not be the case, and it will look much fuzzier. One last remark, maybe. I think there's a bridge to build between the kind of local identities. For example, in many coal regions, we see this strong energy identity, and it's certainly an asset that these regions can, for example, play a role also in the energy transition, because there is a lot of skills, there's a lot of knowledge, which can also be applied to other technologies, like, for example, green hydrogen. But I think it's also important not only to build on the past, but also to bring in the new elements to avoid this lock-in. And I guess from the conversation and the discussion now, I hope to get some more insights on kind of how we can bridge this appreciation of the past and really building on the past and the history of the region, but also embracing the future. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alexander. And that's, I think we have a great start to our discussion. So I don't know if one of the speakers wants to react to what the others said, the first two speakers. If not, we have some questions already from our co-discussants who are with us on the floor. So please, Jessica.
I maybe would just jump in and say, just to underscore the common themes across the three of us. And I think I had the opportunity to visit Germany in February to learn about the coal commission and coal transition process. And I was really struck there, and I'm struck again in this conversation by both the commonalities, but also some of the key differences. And maybe one commonality I might lift up that I heard, I think in both of the other speakers, that's something we're very much grappling with, is what the new economy that we're trying to create can look like, and what it can look like to ensure that workers see themselves in that future. You know, Robert referred to sort of working class, working class workers, and we hear a lot from them that they don't see themselves in the clean economy that folks are talking about today. And I think part of that's been touched on is the challenge we're seeing in unionization in the clean energy sectors. And we certainly have some good examples in the US of good jobs being created in, say, offshore wind or other sectors, good union jobs. But at the same time, a lot of the jobs being created are not as good as the jobs in fossil fuel sectors, for example. So I think this, we have two sides of the same coin that we're trying to focus on. One, how do we create more good jobs in the clean economy, at the same time that we focus on, you know, just transition and ensuring that workers that are impacted and communities that are impacted, that are historically, you know, shaped fully around fossil fuel assets, aren't left behind. So I think I've heard that theme kind of consistently, and just wanted to lift that up as a key challenge that we're grappling with.
Okay, great, thank you. I think we'll have a comment from Christoph, if you're there, and then, is it Casper?
Yeah, hi. I was just trying to write up my question before, but anyway. Well, it's,
yourself.
yeah. My name is Christoph Menzel. I'm working in the energy sector for like roughly 8 years. Now working with the German Energy Agency on focusing on green hydrogen, so the development of the market of green hydrogen. Also involved, and that brings me to this place here within the energy transition and just transition, with a like regional background, coming from a lignite coal region in Germany, which is like still operating. So it's the Lausitz, which is the eastern part, south of Berlin. What Jessica said is quite familiar to me in terms of transforming the regions, and we have seen the coal commission in Germany last year with making decisions, and now the government is asked to implement policy on that, and it's like delaying the process. Let's put it that way. It's quite challenging because they can't really address the social impacts. So in the sense of, okay, where are jobs going, and how we include the energy identities, as Alexander said. I think that's probably the most challenging part. Coming to that, so there's like 2 points. I want to like make a comment and maybe give it to the speaker to how do they see that. The first thing, who's talking about it? So talking and discussion. How do you see the role of engaging local communities in that change? From my point, is it's key. It's basically key, and what you all have said is kind of if we talk it on a high level politician sphere, it doesn't include the local communities, and so you get rejection from them, and they will oppose whatever you come with. So how do you see practical tools, practical ways of cooperation? I remember the Progressive Summit last year, which was physically, and there were a couple of ideas, but do you have already some actions, tools in place? So that would be question number one. And then a comment, and also like a question, how do you see that in terms of who is engaging or who is driving the change from coming from the industry and working for the energy industry for quite a while? I see it in two ways. So there's the idealistic dream of having energy independent communities who drives it on its own. Like there's the famous community of Feldheim, which is close to Berlin, which runs 100% renewable, independent of the grid, and so on and so forth. That's a very special case. So, and you can't easily replicate that. So what I'm saying is, first, yes, you need these local drivers and local communities to make changes, but it's, as Alexander said, it's like not a blueprint you can roll out. So it's a call, of course, for local communities to change, but on the other hand, it's like as humanity, we're kind of a species of cooperation, and especially the energy system, it all needs cooperation, needs like big systems. Think about the grid line, infrastructure lines. It needs cooperation, so we need to work together. Also for like producing a huge amount of energy or electricity for cities, urban areas. So we are kind of need big corporations to make things possible as well. So, and as many of you mentioned, there's a shift in terms of a green agenda, a green like strategies for companies. So it's also, they need to be integrated, and that's the difficult part when I'm thinking about identity politics and workers' rights. It's like they're always, sorry for being so long, but they're always like the part who is like opposing change. So how do we integrate that? So because I think we need both levels. So sorry for being so long, but thanks.
We were trying to get to as well. So I don't know if one of the speakers wants to come into that. Alexander, there was something directed at you as well. And then perhaps Mr. Misick, please, Alexander.
Sure, yeah. So maybe starting with your first question around local communities. So I completely agree. And I guess some of the remarks I was making are because of the current developments around the coal phase-out law and the structural change law in Germany. And I guess what I find really remarkable and concerning at the moment when talking about a coal region like Lusatia is that there are a lot of good initiatives in the region. We have vision building initiatives, we have regional development agencies to some extent. There are various really promising projects, and we often hear there is now this big structural change package in a way, which at some point will be approved. But the access to this funding is really difficult, and I think it really has to be ingrained in the law that this local access and the governance around this funding really helps local initiatives, because the threat, and you have pointed at this, is how I see it, that there's a lot of talk about the regions, but in the end, basically there is a lot of money coming from the center with priorities from Berlin for the regions in a way, and that's definitely not the solution. I mean, I would say there are some of the projects from the government directly or indirectly related to transition, which I find interesting. For example, real labor and real life laboratories where you can exactly go into, for example, energy technologies of the future. I guess, again, around hydrogen, that's an interesting one. But I think still with some of the initiatives that the link is not made, but it could be made in the law, and it's not approved yet. So I think there's still a chance. And again, there must be flexibility to adapt if we figure out that the way we're looking at the transition right now has changed in 2 or 3 years because of the situation of coal or something else. Maybe so far from me, because I've talked a lot already.
Yeah, maybe I say some sentences too. Although you are the expert in the energy sector, not me. But maybe I can say something which has some associative interesting elements. I told already that I'm here in Nuremberg, and I did a lot of work in Nuremberg in the last years, and I did also a lot of work in Steyr, which is an Austrian middle range city. And what strikes me a lot, working first in Steyr and then in Nuremberg on projects, is that we can really see very similar things in the last 25 or 30 years. The first thing is we can say that these cities that had a very huge economic transformation in the last 30 years with a very huge crisis, and they are also now cities where you can say, oh, at the end we solved the crisis. Now we are post-crisis. Now we won the change game. Yeah. So it's also the rhetoric of the political and people in the cities and also of the normal people that at the end we won the change game. Yeah, but it was very difficult. But at the end, now it's better. And what you see is that it's not really good. Because the traumatic experiences, they are still in the bones of the people, of the whole society, of the whole communal society. And to illustrate it, in Steyr was a industrial city with a very famous Austrian factory, the Steyr Daimler Buch factories. That they were not really bankrupt, but the time went by and went over them at the time of modernization and restructuring of post-war for this capitalism, and at the end, now Steyr Daimler Buch doesn't exist anymore, and now there is BMW, MAN, also high-tech industries that are connected to primarily MAN and BMW. And here in Nuremberg, we can tell the same story. We had Triumphadler was lost, Quelle was lost, AEG was lost. Really important German and also global enterprises. And for sure, there are now also new players, Datev, and also a very huge player in the region is Siemens for the last 100 years. So they made the change, but for sure you had a trauma in the cities, and part of the trauma is that there are a lot of jobs for people who have high skills, and the people who don't have these high skills, who lost their jobs in the traumatic years, they are now maybe retired or in early retirement, or they are in very low-paid service sector jobs. Yeah, and if we have all that in mind, we have to discuss what does it mean for the next 15 years. Yeah, and for sure, the example you brought with the energy sector, the energy sector is, as far as I can understand, very much by public infrastructure investment-driven sector, where for sure a lot of new jobs can be established, and where you can substitute maybe some of the jobs you will lose, but that you have to tell us. I understand. What I generally would say is that we talk a lot, maybe too much about how can we establish new, wonderful, high-tech, high-skills jobs in a new economy. New economy, not meant with this modern world with new economy, but by the economy of tomorrow. And so we have the misunderstanding that most of the jobs of tomorrow will be highly technical, highly skilled. And I'm not so sure if this is the case, because a lot of jobs we have in a usually also in modern society will be normal jobs, which are not part of the high-tech sector. And so the question is how can we redistribute from the high productive, modern economy, highly automatic, automized, highly digitalized sector where usually people are earning good wages and have good jobs, to two sectors, the private service sector where people usually have low wages, and to a public service sector and infrastructural sector, which is, as we saw now in the last weeks, is something like the backbone of our society that we have to discuss too, I think.
Jessica, let me ask this tough question to you as well. My colleague Charlotte had to move to a different type of job that sometimes take priorities over discussing the just transition. She is a mother. We have discussed two very important questions on which I would like your brief inputs. We've mentioned actually that it is partly counterintuitive to ask to the working class to join the fight for somehow a fast transition towards better environmental outcomes. In France, we have seen that some of the working class people, they were outraged when the moment we talk about taxes for climate, they were impacting themselves. But there is a way, as it has just been mentioned, to give the idea that actually the transition can be a redistribution of opportunities and the creation of opportunities. So how actually to galvanize the community of the workers towards the creation of new jobs, the creation of a better off society. And in this respect, I would also add to this the other topic that colleagues mentioned that you haven't yet touched upon, but we would really like to have also an input from the American experience on getting local communities on board. Here at the FEPS, the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, in partnership with an Irish foundation, TASC, Think Tank Action for Social Change, we are trying to do something in a case study in Ireland, where basically we do run sort of local assemblies. So going around in rural areas, try to put different economic actors and communities together, and reflecting about, okay, what are the bases of their current economic model, how they would like to see it in 5, 10, 15 years time, and try to check what is the type of transformation that they envisage for themselves. So this is a type of partly structured local assemblies. There's also a question from the audience. On top of these topics, on top of these methods, what can be done to connect with local communities?
Great. There's a lot there. Don't let me forget the second question. So on your first point, that is, I think, exactly what Blue-Green Alliance is all about. We fundamentally believe that workers have been presented and communities have been presented with a false choice, that we have to choose between a good job and a clean environment and a safe climate. We were founded on the idea that that is a false choice, that we shouldn't and we don't have to make that choice. I don't mean to gloss over the challenges that we have in bringing working people, unions, and the environmental community together to find common ground. There are certainly challenges that we wrestle with every day around timelines, targets, certain technologies, but there is a huge amount, I would say, I don't have an exact percentage, but say 90%, 95% that we can find agreement on. There are, in the infrastructure space, I would say there is a tremendous amount that can be done that would create millions of jobs and have a dramatic impact on the climate. Clean energy projects, I mentioned earlier, we're not quite seeing the kinds of job quality, the level of job quality that we want to see, but there's no fundamental reason that it has to be that way. We can have clean energy projects that are, from the construction, from even earlier, the supply chain, the manufacturing of the components that go into our projects, to construction of the projects and operation and maintenance of the projects, that can all be done with high quality union labor. So we lay out, I mentioned our Solidarity for Climate Action platform. We lay out what I think is a fairly robust vision for all of the ways that we can get to what the IPCC put out in terms of getting to net zero by 2050, which for the first time we got US labor unions to, those that are part of our Blue-Green Alliance partnership, to formally commit to that target. So we think there is a very concrete and clear roadmap. We do have a number of challenges in the US. I mentioned, we certainly still have conversations to have around certain types of technologies and timelines. We are also, I think in the US particularly, disadvantaged by a few things that make this conversation harder. One is that we don't have a national climate target or policy that is driving this conversation. I think that is a clear way to get key stakeholders to the table and willing to have the hard negotiating conversations. Second is our, I would say, lack of a social safety net. Our healthcare is tied to our employer. So when workers lose their job, they lose so much more than that. So having a conversation about loss and transition is that much harder for us. And I would say, just lastly, at least from what I've kind of learned with my, from European colleagues that I've had the opportunity to talk with, the fundamental role of social dialogue is not understood or at play in the US. So we don't have any kind of built-in system or understanding of how different stakeholders should be coming together. So that's a role that we at the Blue-Green Alliance are trying to play, at least in terms of bringing key labor unions and environmental organizations together. But there is a much wider set of stakeholders, environmental justice leaders, community and economic development leaders, indigenous communities that need to be brought together, that we're trying to work with in this conversation. So I hope that somewhat addresses your first question. And I'll just say on the second point briefly, could not agree more that community-driven solutions have to be one of, if not the answer, when it comes to just transition. This kind of stakeholder-driven process is something that we want to see at every level of the conversation. From if there's a national plan being developed, we are looking at models like the Coal Commission and others that have a set of stakeholders. I recognize, I definitely heard from folks when I was in Germany, different viewpoints on the process, and I think we're behind in a lot of ways. So we have the benefit of learning from you all. But a big part of what we're focused on is how do we get resources, money, technical assistance to communities for capacity building, for planning at the local and regional level, and how do we ensure that stakeholder input and participation is part of the process for how decisions are made when it comes to spending and economic development. So it's definitely, I think, a challenging question and something we're still working through, but could not agree more that it is fundamental, both to building the political will to make this happen, but also to do it in a way that actually works.
Thank you. So we have actually spent the last half hour to discuss how to integrate into the discussion local communities and the working class. Mm-hmm. We haven't, though, yet mentioned, not even once, those that are responsible of putting the topic up high in the agenda, the youth, I would say. Because actually, despite the fact that they have claimed space and reclaim rights over their future, which is one of the reasons why dealing with the transition and transformation is a priority now at the political level on both sides of the Atlantic, we haven't yet been able to transform their impetus, their power, into a real democratic participation. So even those that are actually demanding to be listened, they are not coherently involved in the political and democratic process. So at least for them that they are showing their voices, they are going for rallies. What can we do to make the voice of the future generation heard? And I give you 2 minutes, 2 minutes each, Alexander, Robert, Jessica, by putting forward also some ideas that as FEPS we have repeatedly pointed out in a couple of publications, last one on the Green Deal for all. A future generation ombudsman, someone that the future generations can rely to when they see their rights to a better future compromised. Youth councils, a massive redirection of pension funds to the green economy, and vote at 16 years, so that we make sure perhaps that there are not only a youth council with a consultative status, but there are more youth into the already ongoing active democratic institutions. Could this be a type of response useful to change also the landscape for decision making? Who wants to go first? Need a brave one. Robert, please.
I don't have to, but I can if the others want to think 1 minute more. So I'm glad to be the victim. No, I think we cannot discuss this in the way without discussing the polarization of the political debate generally in many of our countries. Yeah, because I can tell you from Austria, we have, for example, the right to vote for young people from 16. From the beginning, if you are 16, you can vote by general elections and also local elections. But what does it mean in the end with a polarized political debate? The youth is voting green, and the elderly ones and also working class people and working class elderly ones are voting conservative, right-wing populist or right-wing extremist. So and at the end we have a right-wing majority and also something like a government like that, although we have a very special government, a right-wing conservative government with the green part of the government. I think the more important thing would be to organize more rational debates about that in a climate of polarization, and also to come back to this to the situation the old working class is now in, or this traditional working class is now in. We should not forget one thing, and I want to remind on that, and this is crazy in a way, but also understandable, and we have to deal with that thing. If you look back, what the old working class wanted, they wanted to have their share of the wealth, of a fair share of the wealth, and they got a more and more share of the wealth, and the share of the wealth were symbolic. The goods they could consume became symbolic goods. The car, the meat on the table. So if you tell some young people or middle class person or upper middle class person, oh, you shouldn't drive with the car, you don't need a car, or you don't have to eat vegetarian, they would say, yes, we do. The working class people would say, you want to take away my car, which is the symbol that I have a fair share of the wealth. So it's crazy that cars and a lot of these things became also symbols of a rise in wealth. But we have to deal with that. And we can not deal with that if there is still the possibility in a political polarized climate to instrumentalize these sentiments by right-wing populist parties, because then they will do it and they will win.
Thank you, Robert. Alexander.
Yes.
2 minutes maximum.
Okay, I will keep it short. So, I mean, definitely agree with you, and I like basically all your proposals and would sign on them. I said in the very beginning that in just transition processes, there should also be a voice of the ones feeling the climate impacts. And I think, I mean, the argument I tried to make there is an argument of climate justice, basically. And I think it has both a global dimension of basically countries feeling more of the impacts already, while we're also feeling climate impacts. But of course, this also has a youth dimension, because the longer you're on the planet, the more you will see and feel from climate change. My perception of the Fridays for Future movement is the main message is listen to the scientists. And I think we have this really powerful alliance basically between science and the youth also through the Fridays for Future movement. What this means for me is that both of these groups really structurally, and some of your proposals also go in this direction, need to be included in political institutions. So maybe once going back to the Coal Commission in Germany, this was set up pre-Fridays for Future, pre-Greta Thunberg basically going to parliament for the first time. By now, I would hope it's unthinkable that there is no youth representation in a Coal Commission. But I think we really have to think structurally of a lot of the legislation and about the stakeholder engagement processes also in the regions to have youth groups included there. And again, I guess this goes through all levels. I see it on a local level where you already often have youth councils, but also on regional levels and on the EU level. So for example, through the EU budget, where a lot of the transition is funded in various EU countries, you could make this a conditionality that you have a stronger representation of youth in those processes.
Thank you. Jessica.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know that we've really assessed some of the specific proposals that you laid out, though I would underscore what Alexander said about ensuring that communities that are impacted have a voice in the process, and I would certainly agree that youth would be part of that constituency and absolutely should be part of that process. In the US, the conversation around the Green New Deal has certainly not been without its challenges. I think it's been, in some ways divisive within the progressive wing of the party, within the Democratic Party in some ways, completely co-opted by our right. But I would say what I think has been incredibly amazing to see in this process has been both for us, just completely putting climate change back on the political agenda, from the Green New Deal to all of the kind of state level driven policies that have been pushed forward on things like 100% clean energy. It has fundamentally put climate change back as a top political issue and political issue on the agenda for our US Congress. What I think has been, from our perspective, probably the most significant, at least what I would say the most significant of what this has delivered in terms of how it shaped our politics around climate in the US, is the intersection that it puts between climate change, economic inequality, social justice. The Green New Deal resolution has very explicit language around unionization, around high quality jobs, labor standards, domestic content requirements.
Full employment.
Yes, so that was a big shift for us, and those are the principles, and that intersectionality is something that Blue Green Alliance has been working on and talking about since its inception. But it has not been fully understood, I would say, within the progressive movement, within the climate movement. So putting that intersection and economic justice really front and center, and putting working people really front and center in the conversation around climate policy, coupling that with the ambition and the scale of change that we need was a fundamental shift in how we're thinking about policy in the US. So from my perspective, I think that was kind of the biggest development, and certainly very helpful from how we think about these issues.
Thank you, Jessica. We have the pleasure to have here with us today Kasper Zuleki from the University of Oslo. Kasper, you have the right to ask the last question of this webinar to our distinguished guests. I hope you can unmute yourself, perhaps even show yourself, and pose your question.
Right, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right, thanks. So since I have one question to ask, I will have to select because I wanted to ask two. But thanks very much for the very insightful panel. I was struck by what Robert said initially, that we should not think of one working class, but that in fact there are actually multiple working classes. And I think this is really fundamental for our understanding of just transitions, because if we think about the impact decarbonization is going to have on carbon-dependent regions, we really have to understand that it's going to be very varied across different sectors and groups. One thing that came to my mind, which I don't think was raised here, is this kind of gendered nature of decarbonization. So many, I mean, I don't want to generalize, but many fossil-dependent regions have this kind of masculinist culture which was developed throughout history. And paradoxically, decarbonization, even though it can bring economic decline at first, is also perhaps an opportunity for a slight gender role reshuffling in those regions. And here is my question then. Understanding this internal variety between different groups of actors, different sectors, different categories of workers, who do you think are the most important kind of pivotal actors that have to be brought on board if we want, particularly, I mean, low carbon energy transitions, so just transitions in the sense of decarbonization to succeed? I know it's a broad question.
So given that also this question is related to gender, we want the men to answer and to take responsibility on how we have to change to get to parity and how decarbonization can help. But we have 1 minute 30. Alexander, Robert. Fine, please, Alexander.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a tricky one. I mean, I definitely agree with this perception of different working classes in a way. I mean, I think what is really important is to understand the difference between kind of industries which will in a way disappear like coal versus industries which will just change drastically like the car industry. And you have parts of the supply chain which are heavily impacted, especially around the production of the internal combustion engine. So I think this is also where the just transition debate needs to go to this understanding of who is really affected and where do we need to go to. So for me, thinking about it, I mean, core groups we need is well-organized clean industries, but also especially those in the supply chains, for example, in the car industries. And these are different numbers than in most countries in coal, for example. I mean, Poland is a very specific case in Europe, I would say, but in most countries there is a big difference. And I think these are the people where both unions have to think about most, but also the broader just transition and climate movement, how to reach out and how to come up with solutions for those. This also goes to some extent to one of the questions which was raised in the chat. Why wages in renewables might be lower. I mean, there is a big difference between renewable manufacturing versus renewable service sector. And I think we need to go to this level of granularity to understand what's going on.
We really have to resume here and conclude, because we have to leave this digital space free and available for the next talk. And actually, if you are interested in these topics, you'd better stay connected, because in 10 minutes, as far as I remember, there are at least two talks that more or less can continue this discussion, because one will touch on transatlantic cooperation on taxation issues, and to have a proper transformation, we do need resources. So taxation is one of the tools to run the transition. And the second one is how to combine the economic recovery with social outcomes. So social equity in the recovery that we are designing now. This is for what I remember. Check the program and stay with us, PGS 20. Thank you.